The trade deadline in the NHL has officially come and gone. Honestly, one of the bigger and better deadlines I think we've seen in recent years. Tons of big names were moved, the rich got richer, and we finally figured out who the sellers were. So now with that out of the way, it's time to look ahead at the storylines surrounding the final stretch of the season as we gear up for the playoffs, and we're here to do just that today. So with that being said, welcome to Top Shelf, presented by Skyscanner. Hosting today, Levi Smith, joined as always by John Matisz, Kyle Cushman. No Aiden today.
Nope.
But the show must go on. And
Sorry, Aiden.
Yeah, sorry, Aiden. It's tough to see. But yeah, the trade deadline, obviously, it's been a couple days now. I think there's still a few relevant topics that we should touch on. And the one I want to get into right away with you guys is Miko Rantanen and this whole saga. I mean, it's not often a player of his caliber, like one of the perennial forwards in the NHL, gets moved once, let alone twice. And I think it was interesting to see kind of after Dallas got the deal done with him, what started to emerge in terms of the other teams coming for him. Because, I mean, he's one of the best forwards. Everyone's going to throw their hat in the ring for Miko Rantanen. And I think the one that piqued my interest the most was the Toronto Maple Leafs. We saw that they were open to shipping Mitch Marner for him. We don't know if Rantanen would have signed an extension with the Leafs. He had like 4 teams. That was it. And the Hurricanes obviously weren't one of them. I'm sure they would like to have known that before they brought him in. But I want to ask you, Kyle, we'll start with you. Do you think if the Leafs kind of had it pen to paper, were good with the Rantanen extension and both sides were happy, would you be comfortable giving them the green light to ship off Mitch Marner?
Absolutely is the word I would use.
Okay.
And it doesn't even matter whether you think Rantanen or Marner is the better player, because I think it's close enough no matter which player you prefer that the player extended is the player that you want. Where Mitch Marner hasn't been willing to negotiate in season, that's part of the reason why the Maple Leafs at least entertain the idea of going for somebody like Rantanen. And if you had a deal in place where you shipped out Marner to the Hurricanes and you had Rantanen come in, like you mentioned, on an extension, that's a no-brainer to me. Where you have the uncertainty of Mitch Marner, he could walk after the season, you could sign him. You don't know what that's going to happen. But if you have the certainty of having a Rantanen extended, I much prefer that in that scenario. And then you can get into the debate of which the better player is and whatnot. But for me, just straight up with an extended Rantanen, that's the easy pick there. It becomes a much more difficult question, though, if it's an unsigned Miko Rantanen and you're just making that swap. But I don't think that's something that the Leafs were necessarily entertaining there.
Yeah. I do appreciate Brad Treliving going to Mitch Marner and asking him to waive his no move. Given Marner's history in Toronto, it's like finally someone is coming to the table with a creative idea.
Yes.
We've been waiting half a decade for the Leafs to at least think about doing something dramatic. And it seemed like on his way out, Kyle Dubas was hinting, okay, I might shake up the core 4, but Treliving to this point has not. And, when a guy like Rantanen is out there, top 10 forward in the league, and he's like this special blend of power and finesse and crazy good playoff numbers. I think he has 101 points in 82 playoff games.
Stupid numbers.
It's not bad.
So it's like he's very desirable and obviously would add a different look to the forward group. You're giving up probably another top 10 forward if you're trading Marner as well. So it's, as Kyle outlined, like it's not so like cut and dried where it's like one for one, do it no matter what. It's a conversation because you're giving up something special in Marner, but I mean, if there's an extension attached to either of these guys, you're taking the guy with the extension, right? That sort of stability, that certainty, and you hope for the best moving forward.
Yeah, I think I agree. The certainty of like come July 1st, knowing that, okay, we've got this guy signed, I think outweighs either kind of talent comparison of the players. And I do think even if, let's say, you're comparing the two and you think maybe Rantanen's a little bit worse than Marner, I probably would still go ahead and make this deal considering, I mean, I guess we'll have to see what happens this postseason, but just considering, the core 4 hasn't really shown anything yet, so why not at least mix it up in one way or the other?
Just to jump in here, like a sneaky winner, though, of this whole drama, involving Rantanen going to multiple teams and then finally signing in Dallas, sneaky winner is Marner. He's the number 1, no question, free agent now. What, is number 2 like a Bennett or like an Ehlers or Tavares on his own team in terms of UFAs? Like, he can walk into free agency and command pretty much whatever he wants. The salary cap limit's going up. Obviously, we'll see what he does in the playoffs, but he had a really good 4 nations. So, like, if Marner really does want to test free agency, he's setting himself up quite nicely here in
Yes.
terms of how he's playing his cards.
Yes, had the shootout winner too just the other night.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think he's gonna have a boatload of offers to field, and he really gets to do whatever he wants. So I don't even blame him for kind of keeping things on the low and trying to kind of keep his cards hidden. I think it makes sense if I'm Marner. Switching gears a little bit, I think another important narrative to talk about post deadline is the Boston Bruins. Obviously, they shipped out captain Brad Marchand. They shipped out Carlo, Charlie Coyle, Trent Frederick. They're all gone. And just 2 years removed now from that team in 2022-23 that set the record for the most points in a regular season, 135 points. 5 guys are left on that roster. Complete makeover of this team. And so, John, I want to ask you, given the direction they're going and then being sellers at the deadline for honestly like the first time in what feels like forever. They only missed the playoffs a couple times. They've got the tied for the longest streak in the entire league in terms of playoff streaks. What direction do you go with this team? Because like I said, they only have a couple guys left from that group. Do they try and take a bit of a risk and retool like the Capitals have successfully been able to do? Do they go into full rebuild and maybe we see a guy like McAvoy, Swayman, Pasternak go elsewhere? What direction do you think this team should go in?
I think it's worth retooling. Just because of those guys you mentioned at the end there. You've got Pasternak is 28, McAvoy's 27, Swayman's 26. I believe I'm getting – they're all in their late 20s.
Prime.
Yeah, and like when you have that base, that foundation, especially at all 3 positions, I think you're doing yourself an injustice if you just kind of completely tear it down.
Yeah.
Because you can tear it down if it doesn't work after this retool. And ownership's given the GM and president its vote of confidence. So that tells me that – Don Sweeney and Cam Neely have some leash here. So, hey, be bold, make some moves. And I guess the awkward thing or the downside to trying to retool is that they've got some bad contracts. They've got some guys that are difficult to move. Elias Lindholm, who they brought in to be an impact top 6 center, has been a disaster, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So it'll be tough, especially because they don't have a ton of good prospects. But I do wonder, copycat league, like you mentioned, they look over at Washington and go, a team just did this. So let's just be smart with our pro scouting. Let's be smart with our trades. They have a ton of money coming up in free agency. So, like, there's a world where they can do something here. And the Pasternak, McAvoy, Swayman axis is, like really strong.
Yeah, as long as you have a star player like that at each prime position, literally forward, defense, and goaltender, I don't think you can go the full rebuild, because if you want to keep those players, well, you're not going to be bad enough to be the Sharks, Blackhawks, whatever, and truly contend for first overall. And then really you're just kind of staying where you are. So the retool, you have to be creative, maybe use some of these picks and prospects you just got to go out and acquire either some reclamation projects or whatnot. I think part of it as well, they've battled a lot of injuries this year. They're going to have Hampus Lindholm back. They're going to have Jeremy Swayman from day one. Like, there's a lot of reasons why the Bruins could bounce back and get back in the playoff picture. But for the Bruins, it's not just about getting back in the playoff picture. It's about actually contending for a Stanley Cup. And to do that, I think the retool route is the way that they got to go.
Well, and I think the way that they handle the deadline, they kind of telegraph their plans too, where they bring in like a Casey Middlestat versus like another first rounder or a high second.
And they got a second round pick in that trade too.
Yeah. There you go. And they bring in Fraser Minton. I understand he's like not in the NHL yet, but like he's going to be as soon as next year maybe. So he's a guy who immediately joins your team. A couple of other acquisitions of guys in their 20s. So I would be surprised if, like, come the summer, it's like they're making these seismic changes in terms of the actual cornerstones, because they're sort of on this path of retooling already.
Right. I do think it's interesting to note, I think Brad Marchand was pretty vocal about wanting to reason with the team. So what do you guys make of that in the sense of he still wanted to be there? He's the captain. I think he deserved to stay there, to be honest. I'm glad he got out the door for the Leafs' sake. And he's on the Panthers now. And I think that's a really great spot for him. But he still wanted to stick around. So what do you look at in terms of that, just the Bruins' vision?
Well, while I appreciate Marchand's like feelings and all of this, I think that the Bruins made the right choice. Like, you got to be cutthroat in the 32-team league. You got to, upset the odd person if you want to. Like, you look at Vegas Golden Knights, Tampa Bay Lightning. The teams that are winning cups are doing things like this.
Yeah.
And people look at the package that they got, or I guess the one pick they got back from Florida, and go, really? You did all that? You upset everyone for that? But like Marchand's injured right now. There's a reason why it's a second with a condition to become a first, because who knows like how impactful he'll be, how much he'll be involved in the playoffs for the Panthers. So I thought it was one of those trades where if you take a step back and take sort of the emotion out of it, it made sense. Like if they don't want this guy around in terms of, turning over a new leaf, and they think he's sort of past his prime, which is true, I thought it was time to cut bait.
Yeah, I think for me, like, we don't have a lot of details in terms of what the actual gap of money was between the team and the player. It seemed like they had agreed on a 3-year term, but money was the issue that just couldn't be overcome. If we're talking about like an 8 million AAV versus a 7 million thing, that's something that you just kind of have to overcome and keep Marchand. But if we're talking about like $1.5 million, $2 million per season over this term, and you're talking about overpaying another player in not free agency, but re-signing one of your players like that after already having a bad offseason this past summer where you trade Linus Ullmark early, and then you sign Elias Lindholm to a bad contract, Nikita Zadorov to a pretty penny as well, and then you don't get Swayman done until late there. You can't really afford to spend those dollars poorly again and over multiple years. So it really depends what that gap actually was, and we'll see what Marchand obviously ends up signing for this offseason. But I can definitely see from the Bruins' perspective why you would maybe want to move on. It does hurt when you only get that conditional second-round pick, but there's definitely a way that this could play out in the Bruins' favor looking back, as it did for the Lightning, where the Lightning took a lot of heat for letting Stamkos go and going after Jake Gensel, and nobody is complaining about that move now.
No, yeah, it's true. I think, needless to say, with them being sellers, it's the first time we can kind of say, oh, the Bruins, they're going to be in Cancun this summer, or maybe a place like Turks, which would be crazy. But if you want to get down to a place like Turks and Caicos and join the Bruins on the beach, Skyscanner has you covered. They've got deals on flights, hotels, car rentals, all in one simple search. Just head to the link in our bio for more on that. Shifting gears now with the trade deadline being behind us, guys. I think it's time we get into establishing who really are the Cup contenders, because honestly, with seeing the transactions that got made at this deadline, I think there is a very clear group of contenders, and I honestly think it's a bit shorter of a list than maybe we had thought, at least going into the season or going into the deadline. Like, the rich really did get richer. And aside from that, though, like, there's a huge drop-off in terms of just kind of the talent moving around between the good teams and the bad teams. So that's what I'm going to have us do. We'll do a draft-off here, 3 picks each. We'll start with you, John. Of our Cup contenders, we're just putting together what we think is the best group of 3 teams each that we can, and see who comes out on top of the Cup. Your first pick for the number 1 Cup contender post-deadline right now.
Yeah, I'm going to be really lame here and pick the Florida Panthers, the defending Cup champs, who, acquire Seth Jones before the deadline, obviously pick up Marchand, and, do a couple of other things around the edges. I don't know. I look at this team and I just see no weaknesses. I also see a team that hasn't really, gone full throttle throughout the regular season, yet find themselves first in the Atlantic. If they can hold that down, I think that increases their chances of making the Cup final significantly, with Toronto and Tampa Bay potentially battling it out in the first round. And, they're well coached. I love their heavy forecheck game. We have the proof of concept of certain players stepping up, Verhaeghe, Bennett, Tkachuk, who's supposed to be back for the postseason. Forsling was a revelation last postseason. So as sort of like easy this pick is in terms of like, oh, you're going with the Cup champs, if I'm being truthful, they're at the top of my list, not by a lot, but they're the team that should be hunted versus being the hunted.
Yeah,
hunting.
I will say.
Know what I'm talking about.
I mean, yeah, they had such a good run last year, and the depth that they have. Like, I love the moves they made at the deadline. I will say, without Tkachuk until the playoffs, Aaron Ekblad's now out 20 games PDs. Until the I think
third game he'll come back in the first round.
Yep. They are currently leading that Atlantic Division, but could you see them maybe slipping Leafs or a Lightning passing them, and that doesn't jeopardize your stance
it certainly does.
I
guess if they didn't have Seth Jones, I would be way more concerned about the Ekblad thing. Yes. But I feel like he's kind of replacing Ekblad in the pecking order of the right side anyways, and I think they can survive without Ekblad towards the end of the regular season. Then 2 games in the playoffs, not ideal, but I think they'll be okay.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the second pick, Kyle. Who do you go with?
Well, with the number one in the East off the board, I think I got to go number one in the West. And for me, that's the Dallas Stars after this trade deadline. One of the best teams in the NHL just went out and got the best player moved at the trade deadline, which is a huge boost to a Dallas Stars team that has gone on some runs, but hasn't gotten over that hump to get back to the Cup final since they did a handful of years ago, and obviously haven't truly gone out and won the Cup here since they did back in the
99?
controversial,
Yeah.
the controversial finish there.
Yeah.
For the Stars, for me, the big thing is the offensive depth. Their top nine is absurd. When you look at the Rupe Hintzes, the Wyatt Johnsons, Jason Robertson, the crazy thing for me is after some slow starts this season, Robertson and Johnston, since the turn of the calendar, producing at 100-point paces since the start of 2025. So you have those two guys clicking, and you're adding Miko Rantanen into that mix. That's scary for me. The big concern, obviously, is the defense and what's going to happen there with Miro Heiskanen's health and some of the supplementary pieces there. I don't love like the Cody Cece's, Matt Dumba's, Ilya Lyubushkin's getting minutes, but I think that offensive depth is so good that they'll be able to go head-to-head against the top teams at the top of the lineup, and they have the significant advantage in terms of depth. So I think this is the year that the Stars are going to go on that big run. They're the number one team to beat in the West for me, even though it is an absolute gauntlet in that Central Division.
Well, and they've got Ottinger there too, right? So you've got this incredible forward group in Ottinger, and it's like the defense, it's fine.
There's a question mark for every single one of these teams,
Yes, of
which is
course.
the exciting
Yeah.
part. Like we just talked about the Panthers, and the question marks being the amount of games that they've played, the style of play, going deep in the playoffs, the injuries that they've got. Like 1 through 9 here, I don't know who you guys are going to go the rest of the way, but I can assure you that there's going to be question marks for everybody, and that's what makes this draft and what makes this post-deadline run so exciting, because as great as the Stars look on paper, as great as the Panthers look on paper, there's question marks there.
You never know. But yeah, I mean, it's tough to go against those picks. I
want to see the back-to-back picks here.
Back-to-back.
This is big
yeah.
here.
Snake draft here, and you guys going with those teams, it might be a bit chalky of me and maybe not the best foreshadowing, considering, these teams haven't always panned out in the playoffs. I'm going to take the point leaders in each conference.
Ooh, okay.
I'm going with the Washington Capitals, and I'm going with the Winnipeg Jets. Kind of quieter deadlines for both teams, I think. I honestly think Winnipeg, not that they didn't make the wrong moves, but they might have been a bit like on the losing side of this deadline just with the Stars and the Avalanche and how much they bulked up. But at the end of the day, these two teams have proven all season that they are at the cream of the crop when it comes to the best teams in this league. And I know Winnipeg especially doesn't have that playoff success. Washington does have the Cup on their resume a couple years ago. I still can't go against what these teams have done this year. They have looked so dominant. You don't see teams produce the levels that they do, especially with the way that they've done it with Washington. Like we talked about, they did that awesome retool. I mean, it's just an electric factory over there with Ovi chasing the goal record. And Winnipeg, just how dominant they've been. And they have, at the end of the day, I know we don't know what he'll look like in the playoffs. We never really do. But I still feel okay having Connor Hellebuck between the pipes in Winnipeg. I don't think you can ever feel bad about that. And so I think if I can pick I get both of these teams, I would hope that one of them can maybe face some demons and right their wrongs and go on a run. But I feel safe having these two teams just given what they've done this season.
Well, and the through line between the two of them is that they haven't stopped being dominant all season. Like everyone's kind of waiting, like, okay, Washington did all this turnover. Okay, it'll come back to haunt them at some point. It's like the vibes continue to be immaculate there. Winnipeg, again, like top of the Central pretty much all season.
Yeah.
And, Hellebuck's about to win another Vezina. They don't do maybe what everyone wanted at the deadline in terms of acquiring a Brock Nelson, but obviously some trade protection there.
Yeah.
But no, and Winnipeg did add. It might not be like the pieces.
Yeah.
But sometimes it ends up being the depth guys or the teams who only add depth players that actually have the better postseason.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
they're good picks.
The chemistry element is the intriguing thing here, because we talk about all these other teams that have made big splashes, added multiple players. These two teams have really kept the same kind of mix and will into the playoffs. That chemistry element could be a factor in their favor here.
I do agree. I think looking at teams, because it's honestly not often that team steamrolls the regular season like those two have and then go on to have success in the playoffs. But I think more often than not, you'll see teams who are having all that success. They'll mix up the chemistry a little bit, bring a guy in, take a guy out, and that sometimes is enough to kind of have everything go sideways. So I do like. I honestly don't mind that they were quieter at the deadline. I think it bodes better for the future of them. Back to you, Kyle. We're snaking back around. You get pick number 5 here. You've got Dallas already. Who do you got next?
I'm going to stay in the West,
Okay.
and I'm going to take the Vegas Golden Knights. It's a little risky taking a team in the Oilers division here, but I just love the makeup of the Golden Knights. They were actually my cup pick before the season, and I've really liked the way that things have played out in season here, where they didn't have the splashy deadline that everyone was maybe expecting, because that's what they typically do. But they bring back Riley Smith, which I think is going to be great for the vibes there. Jack Eichel's having a career season. He's been absurdly good this year. Good. And I still look at their defense, and top to bottom, it is everything you want in a playoff defense. They have the size, the mobility, the experience, all of it. I think you look at last year and what happened in the playoffs there. If they get a little bit more success in the regular season and don't have that matchup against the Stars in round 1, I think we're talking about a very different outcome for the Golden Knights when it comes to a playoff run and such. And so maybe it's a bit of help that they didn't go on a long run and they had an offseason to reset. But I love everything about this team, between the forwards that they have, the playoff experience there, the elite defense, and I still believe in Adin Hill as a goaltender that can get it done in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of the chemistry mix and like when do you make deals, when do you not, like they've been so active at previous deadlines that like a Tomas Hertl, obviously he's acclimated now, but like it's not like this guy has been there for 5 years. Like he's still somewhat of a new player for Vegas. Brendan Saad. So they kind of got their business done before the deadline and at previous deadlines for the most part. But yeah, they're big, they're mean, they're fast. Bruce Cassidy's a fantastic coach.
They're a playoff style team,
yeah,
and that's what we're picking right here. Yeah. So I really like their makeup here, and depending on what the matchups are in the Pacific and whatnot, I like the way that it's trending for a first round matchup, and then we'll see what happens in a second round and such. But it's always dangerous betting against an Oilers team that can just turn it on at any time. But I'm going to take the Golden Knights here for my team in the West and out of the Pacific there.
Yeah, no, I definitely, it's tough to go against a team like Vegas. I mean, they've got the resume. It speaks for itself. So on to your second pick here. You get the two
the back-to-back here.
I'm gonna reveal them
I'm a little
one by
jealous
one.
that I don't get the back-to-back.
Yeah, you don't get one of those classic snake ones. I'm going to go one by one. So Avalanche here at number 6.
Mm-hmm.
So they acquire Brock Nelson, famously. Looks tremendous on the weekend. They've done some serious surgery to their roster this year.
Have the roster has changed?
Their goaltending is completely flipped over. You know, Ryan Lindgren's on the back end. They have like 3 or 4 new forwards. They've really done some heavy work, but I think it's all been like with, you know, some synergy in mind. I think they've all been pretty smart moves. So, I mean, whenever you have Makar, whenever you have McKinnon, and this will relate also to my other pick as a heads up in terms of the star
players,
power, you're already like in, you know, the top 10 with just your baseline is so high. And then what they've done here is by trading Rantanen when they thought they couldn't extend him, they basically brought in, I don't know if I would say equal value, but, you know, maybe if you consider all the different players, they kind of went for more of a quantity play over quality. Like they didn't go out and get another star. They brought in Brock Nelson and other parts and to fill in those Rantanen dollars. And that takes a little bit of the heat, if you will, or a little bit of the workload off McKinnon and his line. You know, Matisz has looked fantastic with McKinnon. So I don't know. I just think that the Avs are, calling them like a sleeping giant is just, it's not quite right considering they've won a cup and they have these stars, but I feel like their trajectory is pointing up.
I love the Nelson pickup so much. Like I think it's one of the best deadline fits, and they gave up a lot to get him in the first round pick and one of the better prospects drafted right now in hockey, and Cal Ritchie, who I think is going to be a great player. But he's not helping the team today, and Brock Nelson is a great fit. We'll see what happens in the offseason and such. But the Avs, the thing since they won the cup has been, how do you replace Nazem Kadri at 2C? They've tried a couple of players, haven't found that good fit. Brock Nelson fits everything that you're looking for in a second-line center on that team, and you're going to get to see Nelson with maybe a bit more skill or in a secondary role, which could bring even more out of him as a consistent 30-goal guy that I don't think we talk about much as that consistent 30-goal guy. He has 3 straight 30-goal seasons coming into this season, and he's stepping on to an Avs team that is great offensively. I really like that pickup.
Well, and like if Val Nichushkin can stay in the playoffs this year, like he had
that's a big factor. Yeah,
last 2 off season or postseasons, he's left midway through. So, like he's such a force when he's on his game. His A game is, I mean, he becomes
had the
like
hat trick over the weekend.
Yeah, in individual games, he's a superstar. Like I'm not saying he's a superstar in general, but his A game is just incredible. So that's an X factor there for them.
And we talk about the chemistry element. That's the one thing that does give me a little bit of pause with the Avalanche here, where they've changed so much in season that things have got to come together fairly quickly here, because you brought in some guys before the deadline, it just kind of in the early part of the season, and they start to get acclimated, and then you change things again here at the deadline. I think it's all positive changes that have made the roster better, but you got to find those mixes that work here in 15 to 20 games before the playoffs start, and you're probably staring down a matchup potentially against Miko Rantanen and the Dallas Stars now, which
awesome.
would be incredible. But that's the one thing that gave me some pause for the Avalanche, why I went for the Stars instead.
I'll go with Oilers at 7, and I don't have to, go too long on this, but like Draisaitl is having the best season of his career, probably win the Hart Trophy. I looked it up today. Guess who's second in points per game this season? It's McDavid. Like, guy's having a down year, quote unquote, for his own standards, but he's producing at a pretty high level. I mean, I'm concerned about certain parts of the roster, but that power play continues to be electric. And those two players can put a team on their back, as they've shown in previous runs.
How about Jake Wallman there over the weekend?
I also like that addition,
Looked really great. I mean,
puck-moving guy.
Tough to go wrong. John goes here with the two teams in the finals last year. So, I mean,
that's a pretty good duo to have.
Yeah, not the worst strategy you went with there. I don't mind it. But moving on to your last pick, Kyle. Pick number 8 on the board. Still some good teams left. Someone, I think, people back home watching, they're realizing someone's going to get cut out here.
Yeah.
But who do you go at with 8?
Well, yeah, when I was preparing for this draft here, there were like 10 teams on the short list, which meant no matter what, one of them's getting cut off here. And you're looking at the East here, the teams that are left, and I think that's the way that we're probably going to go to finish off here when you look at the teams available. The Atlantic Division scares me a lot right now because of the uncertainty, so I'm going to go in the Metro with the Carolina Hurricanes. Yes, they've taken a lot of heat for how things happened with Miko Rantanen, but that being said, it's still a great roster who plays a very specific style that has had a lot of success, even if they haven't broken through to get to a cup final or anything like that here. I love the addition of Logan Stankoven as a player that fits the Rod Brind'Amour dog-on-a-bone style. I think he's going to be great in that lineup. And I still look at the defensive makeup and the depth they have there. And I look at the forwards that they have and the style that they play. I have some uncertainty with the goaltending, but if they get decent enough goaltending, I think the roster overall is a team that can still contend in a Metro division that has suddenly gotten a lot more question marks when the Devils don't have Jack Hughes there and whatever's going to happen with the Capitals. I think that they've got a pretty favorable first-round matchup coming up as probably the number 2 seed in that division, and then we'll see how things play out in the first round and who they match up against. But when it's the Hurricanes versus the Capitals, I'm sorry, I just still don't know what to think of the Washington Capitals this season, as good as they've been. So I like their path to the conference finals again, and then when I look at the Atlantic Division and the absolute dogfight that's going to be, I wonder how that's going to play out. And so for the Hurricanes, as much as I think probably the two Atlantic teams right now are maybe better on paper, I like the Hurricanes' path a little bit more, so that's why they round out my group of 3 here.
Yeah, the Metro's really gone haywire this season with
Right.
the Rangers having all that drama and slipping back and not being really a legitimate contender. The Islanders, I mean, I don't know if we had great hopes for them, but they've slipped down the standings. You mentioned Jersey and the Jack Hughes injury. Carolina, like, as much as they deserve to be on this list, like, they also traded for Miko Rantanen and traded him away. Like, they're sort of in some sort of transition, trying to do multiple timelines. So they're clearly not, like, all in on this season. And then you got Washington. You mentioned, people really
we
like
just
this
don't
team,
know.
but it's kind of out of nowhere. So, what a weird season for the Metro.
Very strange, very strange. I don't mind that pick at all, to be honest. Which
finish it off here.
Leaves me with pick number 9. Yes, like I said, I alluded to Leafs, Lightning, kind of the 2 left. And I have to go with my heart, and that's the Leafs. They've had a bit of a better season in my defense. The last 2 times, obviously, these teams met in the playoffs. The Leafs actually won. Very big shocker there. But I just think, although I really did like the Bolts deadline, like bringing in Yanni Gourde and Bjorkstrand, like those are great moves. I have a tad bit more confidence in Toronto because I like the moves that they made. Like, they didn't make anything flashy, really, but Scott Laughton and Carlo are definitely good additions. We've been saying this for years, but they have all of the talent and the makeup to go on a cup run. They just don't They just haven't yet. And, it might be false hope, as I always have with this team. But I think I just trust them and their upside and what we've seen. Maybe Matthews hasn't exactly taken another step that we were hoping for. But I think he's shoring up his game a lot better. He's got the captain now. He's more of a leader. He's playing defense a bit better. And the way that this team's trending, at some point they need to break through. And so that's why I've got them there at 9 over Tampa Bay. I gotta have a little bit of hope in them still. And to be fair, like, they've had a good season. They didn't make too many big deals or anything at this deadline, so that chemistry we were talking about stays intact. And yeah, that's who I'm going with my last pick. And I do feel good about the fact that I've got 3 teams, 3 different divisions. So I've really opened up. I've opened up the doors here for my squad. But yeah, I think these all stack up pretty good. The back-to-back picks that me and John were able to have, I think, kind of helps you pick and choose where you want. But I mean, we'll have the people let us know in the comments which of these 3 groups they think could take the cake.
Question for you guys: out of, say, the teams from 6 to 9, which one do you think has the highest chance of making us look silly, like not having them in that top 5?
Yeah,
You
Colorado for me.
think so?
It was a toss-up for me between Dallas and Colorado at 2. And I didn't want to double down with both in the same division at 2 and 5 because one of those is probably going to lose in the first round because they're probably going to play each other. But I seriously considered taking Colorado at 5 there.
I do agree. And honestly, like, just looking at this board, that Toronto kind of seems like it's a bit.
But you know what? Looking back to last year in the playoffs, they had the Matthews stuff. They had the Nylander stuff in that series. True. If both those guys are healthy and available throughout the entire series, it's probably a different story. You've got the different head coach now. You have a bit of a different makeup of the roster. Like, I don't hate the pick by any means, especially if they go out and finally win the division, which they haven't done. That's going to change their makeup.
I was going to add that too, with we talked about earlier about the Panthers, and obviously they'll be good come playoff time. But if the Leafs can catch up and get that 1 seed, I think that changes everything. But I will say, 2 Canadian teams on the list for me as well. And I do have faith in Winnipeg. I do like what they've got. And if you've got faith in them, just like I do, you're looking to head down to the peg to catch them in action now, or once they get to the postseason, don't forget to use Skyscanner. They'll make that process a whole lot easier. Again, link in bio for that. Now, it's rare that a show we do goes on this long without talking about the greatest chase in all of sports right now in Alex Ovechkin. John, I know you've been watching it. You've been following it. He's 8 away from tying. He's 9 away from breaking. He's got 18 games left this season. I'll give you the floor, and you can empty the notebook and just talk about this feat and where Ovi's at right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a perfect time to circle back on this because the trade deadline is behind us. As you said, 18 games left for the Capitals. Ovechkin's scoring at a 0.69 goals per game.
It's unbelievable.
Like, I've been speaking of, waiting for the shoe to drop in terms of the Capitals and the Jets, how about Ovi? The guy breaks his leg mid-season, and pretty much his pace has been the same.
Yeah, that's
before
the
injury
part.
And after the injury. And obviously, things are going to heat up in terms of the pressure and intensity and teammates trying to find him.
Seems like he thrives in it.
I was going to say, but I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. And all eyes are on what he's doing, and the betting odds are pretty favorable for him breaking it this season, minus 225. And that's an implied probability of, I believe it's 69.2%.
Yeah, very good.
That's pretty good. I mean,
right in line with the goal scoring rate.
Yeah. So, which is actually, that's a good point. So, hey, if there were points during the season where I thought, something's going to come up. He's going to want to go on a cold streak. This is a early next season thing. It's looking like it's going to be this season. It's just a matter of when, not if. I mean, fingers crossed, right? I think at this point, people are all in on him doing it. Dream scenarios. So, 18 games left. I think the last game of the season is against Pittsburgh. The only caveat is that it's in Pittsburgh. This type of stuff would be great at home. He's been so important to that franchise. But when you have Sid in the building too, they've been the faces of the league for 20 years. It would just be perfect, and it would lead into the playoffs. Be such a tremendous way for the league to showcase itself before the first round of the playoffs, which is usually the best time of the year. So there's that. And then, there's late March, early April, the Capitals are at home. So it's okay, maybe that would be all right too. So I think it's either a home date or that Pittsburgh final game. And wouldn't it be something if he pulled that off? Now, one thing I've been thinking about lately is the difference between young Ovi and old Ovi. Old Ovi, who we see nowadays, a fair amount of empty netters. He's got his spot on the power play. Obviously, still scores a multitude of ways, but that's kind of how we know him. Young Ovi, like, if you go back and look at the footage, some of it's grainy because it's from, 05, 06.
The kids forget.
Yes.
Look, I mean, it's
but
incredible.
he was, like, just an absolute wrecking ball out there.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you forget, right? It's been 20 years, and he's had, like, he's had different points of his career in terms of style and brand and where the team's at, and is he chasing a cup or chasing goals. But young Ovi, like, it's really fascinating to me where you look at the goals record. You put aside as the most impressive thing about him. But second most impressive thing is that he was this crazy physical player and never got hurt. And it wasn't like, he came in the league and the first 50 games he was wild and running guys over. It's like, no, he did that for like the first 10 years and he didn't get hurt. So the durability factor is also legendary on top of the goal scoring factor. And, I think in the lead up to him breaking the record, we should keep that in mind. And obviously some of it is genetics, but there's something about also maybe the way that he plays the game that, allows him to stay intact for as long as he has. It's kind of ironic that he breaks his leg in the season that he's probably going to break the goals record, considering it might be the worst injury of his career. And myself and our colleague Nick Ferris are working on an oral history of that 05-06 Caps team, Ovi's rookie season, and sort of based around Ovi's first month more than year. First month in the year, in the NHL.
Yeah.
And a couple of things from that. I mean, talking to his old teammates and coaches and broadcasters, like they knew he was a big deal coming over from Russia as a first overall pick. But even from training camp, they're like, okay, he'll be like in the Calder race. He'll be, a franchise cornerstone. But to a person, that it's something these people bring up unprompted where they're like, I didn't think he was going to be nearly this good. And obviously, once he has the rookie season where he puts up 52 goals in 81 games, your mind starts to change. But that's something that's really jumped off the page in terms of talking to these people that have known him forever and their first impressions. And another thing is, his sort of fashion back in the day. He had Affliction T-shirts. He had ripped jeans. He loved Dolce & Gabbana. And that all seems like totally normal now. We've got the runways, before the game, and guys like Matthews and Line wearing hats and just very fashion forward. 05-06, it was you wear your suit and you look like everyone else in the room, and I just find it humorous and it's a funny image to have in your head where you've got the 19-year-old rookie sticking out like a sore thumb and just really loving the fact that he has access to these different
so awesome
sets of clothing now that he's in North America. And just one last thing from the reporting so far on that story is, you guys remember that Coyotes goal where he scores on his back, right?
Yep.
So I didn't realize until I started talking to people for this story, but he did that the day after they had their rookie party. So as we all know, like that's when you play guilty, right? And so that road trip, I'm trying to remember the exact sequence of events, but I think it was Dallas, San Jose, Arizona, something like that. It was like a 3-game road trip on the West Coast. He scored something like 8 out of 10 goals, and he's a rookie, right? And so they have the rookie party in Scottsdale, and then the next day he goes and scores multiple goals, including that one on his back. That is still arguably the best goal of his career as far as highlight reel material. So
iconic.
I just love that he's this rookie that is trying to be
That's awesome.
one of the guys, and then also putting on an absolute clinic on the ice. And his old roommate Brian Wilsey was telling me that, aside from that goal, in after playing, the sort of playing guilty element of it, he's like, from that rookie party, he can remember, he can see it in his mind to this day. They're walking back to the hotel, obviously intoxicated, and Ovi's holding on for dear life a champagne bottle that has autographs from all his teammates. And there's something about that where it's like, this guy's a superstar, he's from Russia, and he's just one of the guys trying to fit in. He's like, I need to take this thing home. I'm not in a great state. I need to hug it at this point, and this is the most important thing of my night. And I just love that because it can be so easy for these superstars to have entourages and get caught up in their own hype. And by all accounts, Ovi's been always a well-liked teammate, so I like that anecdote a lot.
Yeah, I will say, awesome. I think with the comparison I draw with his longevity and where he's at is LeBron-esque in the sense of those two have done it for so long. LeBron just broke that points record in the NBA. Ovi's hunting down this goals record. And I think just it perfectly encapsulates Alex Ovechkin because you see, LeBron James spends $1 million every year on keeping himself in shape and keeping himself healthy. And then you see Alex Ovechkin drunk, and you see him jumping around in Washington after they
Yeah,
win the
the
cup,
fountain.
drinking 100 beers.
Subway onto the plane.
He loves his Coca-Cola,
the
Red
best.
Bull, yeah.
It's the best. And I think, too, the way that he's still able to captivate everybody with this goal chase and how big it is for hockey. Like, a quick story, but it's a hilarious one. My friend, not the biggest hockey guy, I got a FaceTime from him like it was like an Amber Alert the other day. And he's like, dude, we need to find which game he's going to score this. Like, this is a great investment opportunity. We could quintuple our ticket prices.
That's
and I was
awesome.
like, dude, you're right. So we were kind of tracking him
Yeah.
down. Didn't end up pulling the trigger, but just the way that I think everyone's going to come together, especially when he's a goal or two away, is going to be incredible. So shout out Venny for that story. But shifting gears here, Kyle, I want to talk to you about something a little bit different. It's the month of March. We just had Women's Day, which was a big deal. And The Score has their feature article of the 25 most or is it the most or
Yeah,
25
of the most influential
of
women
the most
in sports,
influential. Yeah, exactly. A very good article. Everyone go check it out if you haven't already. But there was a couple hockey players in there. Obviously, Marie-Philippe Poulin. We had Jessica Campbell get in there, which was really cool to see. Sarah Nurse. And so I want to talk to us about the article and just kind of with the PWHL and how much it's scoring right now, the direction it's headed. Where could this list kind of look like down the road with these rising stars that we're seeing more and more in hockey?
Yeah, it's a great article, and I highly recommend people check it out. I had the privilege of voting on it and contributing to it. But instead of looking at the current group that you just mentioned there, I want to look forwards at some of the players and some of the people who I think are going to be on this list in hockey in the next 5+ years. So I think the first one that I think we could see on the list as soon as next year is Team USA forward, for right now at least, Layla Edwards. She won MVP at the Worlds last year in 2024. Just a dynamite winger, elite goal scorer, 6 foot forward, dominant power forward, the future of Team USA. She's actually the first black woman to play for Team USA. And the fascinating piece that I mentioned with her being a forward is they're actually trying her on defense now, where Team USA has so many good forwards, and Edwards has such a big frame that could be good on the back end, right-handed. Everyone's always looking for that big right-handed defender. Well, it might just be Layla Edwards for Team USA. She's played primarily at forward. She won MVP as a forward. They're going to try her on defense in the 2025 Worlds coming up in April, which could potentially lead to her being a defender at the Olympics next year, leading into her PWHL draft year. She's somebody that is going to make a big impact in hockey going forwards. Looking north of the border, though, for a Canadian that's going to make a big impact, Chloe Primerano with the Minnesota Golden Gophers in the States right now in the NCAA is one of the best prospects we've seen in women's hockey in years. If she makes the Canadian World Championship team, she'll be the youngest player since Marie-Philippe Poulin made the roster at 18 years old, and she'll be the youngest defender to make it since Cheryl Pounder made it in the mid-90s. She is an exceptional talent, coming from this British Columbia hotbed of talent that has produced Connor Bedard and Macklin Celebrini. She comes from that same area, that same kind of pipeline, and she looks like the future of Team Canada's defense. The crazy stat for me is at the World U18s, she tied Marie-Philippe Poulin's scoring record for a Canadian player as a defender, which is just absurd.
Not bad.
So speaking of kind of the next wave of players that are going to make a huge impact, and speaking of those U18s, Nela Lupušenová is a Slovakian phenom. We don't really see these European players come up and make the same kind of impact that we do see from the Team USA, Team Canada stars. Lupušenová is somebody that's going to change that, where she's already a Wisconsin commit, so she's going to arguably the best program in the NCAA in a couple years' time. She's a 2-time MVP at the U18s. No player has ever done that before, and she's eligible to play at the U18s next year still. And she was the best player on the ice in games against Team Canada, Team USA. In those games, she was the only player to put shots on goal. There was one goal that Slovakia scored at this last U18s that she didn't either have a goal or an assist on. Just absurd player and skill. And you might not know the name, but you've probably seen a clip of her because when she was 14 at her first U18s, she scored a pair of Michigan goals. She scored a Michigan goal at Olympic qualifiers.
14.
This past time. It's absurd. She is an absolute superstar. And looking down the road, probably you're looking at 2030, 2031, a future first overall pick in the PWHL and going to make a huge impact in Slovakian and European hockey overall for the women's game. And shifting to the front office now. We just talked about 3 up-and-coming rising stars on the ice. Well, how about a rising star in the front office? And I look to Amanda Kessel there, where a great player in her own right during her playing career. She'd actually continue playing potentially, but we'll see how that goes for her. Had her career disrupted a little bit due to some pretty severe concussion issues. But she is in the Pittsburgh Penguins front office right now. 2 years ago, she was hired as a special assistant to the general manager. This year, in addition to that role, she's an assistant general manager with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins in the AHL. And there's women that are currently assistant general managers in the NHL. But what makes Kessel one of the more intriguing rising stars, for me at least, in NHL front offices, is she's taking the Jason Spezza pipeline, where Kyle Dubas hired Jason Spezza in Toronto as a special assistant. That's the exact same role that Kessel got 2 years ago. And we've seen Spezza join Dubas in Pittsburgh. He's now general manager of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. Amanda Kessel's working directly with him in that organization. And Spezza, I think all of us agree, is one of the bright up-and-coming assistant general managers that in 5 or fewer years' time is probably going to be running his own NHL team. And Amanda Kessel is on that kind of trajectory in that pipeline. So talking about some of the bright young stars in NHL front offices, I think Amanda Kessel's right there. And whether she becomes an NHL general manager, whether she becomes a PWHL general manager, I think that's in her future, depending on which way she wants to go. So those are 4 women making waves in hockey right now that I think when we look at some future editions of the Score's 25 influential women in sports, I think those are names that are going to pop up on that list sooner rather than later.
I love the global flavor of it, and I also love Layla Edwards doing the Brent Burns career arc.
Right?
That's really cool, and I assume she's in on it. Like,
She
she
did it a little bit.
Yeah.
At the rivalry series, actually at Wisconsin. There are times that she's played forward for 2 periods.
Wow,
and then
that's
in the
cool.
third period, just shifted back to defense when Wisconsin has an absurd lead just to try stuff out. I'm fascinated to see who they pair with her at this upcoming Worlds. I think it might be a veteran like Lee Steckline, who's one of the best defensive defenders in women's hockey, to maybe help with some of that transition. But I'm fascinated to see how it goes, because if she becomes this elite defender who's 6 foot right-handed, all of a sudden that completely changes the trajectory of her career.
All right, on that note, it's time to get into the last segment of the show. Most fun segment here. No Aiden, so someone else has to
I got to
lose.
step up.
Yeah, it's time. I think it's time for John to step up. But we've got a fun one today, and it kind of is in light of the trade deadline again. Perfect encapsulation of recapping all that happening. The Florida Panthers, something that people might not be picking up on what they're doing the last few years. They're bringing in captains. Look 2 years ago, Claude Giroux. You look last year, Kyle Okposo. You look this year, Brad Marchand.
Forgot about Okposo.
Very fun little tidbit there. And so with that happening, I went through and I dug through all of the teams that have at least 2 active former or current captains, right? Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
So all these teams are going to have one guy who's the captain now, but they've got a second captain on the list. I've already mentioned the Panthers, so I'm going to take them off. There's 9 other teams available for you guys, and we're going to see who can name the most. I'll start with you, John. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt because Kyle did get the win last week, so I'm going to start with you. Do you have a team for me off the bat?
We'll go with Toronto because they stripped Tavares of the captaincy, so they automatically have 2.
Toronto is correct. They actually have 4. Lead the league.
Yeah, I meant to do that.
Obviously.
Do that one first,
But yeah, they've got Matthews, they've got Tavares, Alvin Ekman-Larsson, and Max Pacioretty,
Right.
who's still there technically, so I'll count it. But yeah, they've got 4 captains there. On to you, Kyle. Do you have another team?
The Nashville Predators.
Nashville Predators is correct, and they have 3. You guys are taking out the ones with more early here. They've got Roman Josi, obviously, with the C now, Ryan O'Reilly, Steven Stamkos, a good batch of leaders there for sure. Back to you, John.
Vegas Golden Knights.
Vegas Golden Knights is the other team with 3. There we go. Okay. Jack Eichel as well.
Right.
So they've got 3 there, and that one, especially when I put this list down, I forget that Mark Stone's a captain because like all 3 of those guys I feel like they should just all wear the C. Yeah. There's no need for A's over there. Just give them all captains.
3 C's.
But that's correct. So 2-1, John. Back to you, Kyle. Do you have another one?
This is a swing because I can't remember if he ever wore the C, but I'm going to go with the Oilers because I think Corey Perry might have.
Oilers with Corey Perry is incorrect. No Corey Perry captaincy.
That was a dangerous swing.
Was a bit of a dangerous swing. Yeah, you left yourself vulnerable now. It goes back to John. He can go up 3-1, and I'll say to you guys, there's only 9 here, so first to 5 wins. So John's getting close.
I am going to go with the New York Rangers.
The New York Rangers are not on the list either.
Man.
Here we go. The door's back open for Kyle. Yeah. I won't elaborate too much.
No hints.
But we go back to you, Kyle.
But I was actually going on the Rangers train here because they traded Trouba to the Anaheim Ducks because I did forget that they named a captain for this season.
There it is. Yes, Radko Gudas and of course Jacob Trouba. Ducks are on the list. 2-2. Kyle ties it up. We go back to John. Look at that whole top half of the board. Looks very nice.
Yeah, very clean.
I think St. Louis because Justin Falk was the captain in Carolina.
Very good.
Wow, that's a
very
great
good
pull.
He shared captaincy. He wasn't even the sole captain. It still counted. He had the C on his jersey. I think he was the away captain.
Some goofy thing like that,
while Jordan Stahl was also still a captain, but it counts, and he's on the Blues now. Blues have 2, 3-2 for John.
This one's getting tough now. I'm just gonna throw a team out there and say the Avalanche. I feel like Eric Johnson might have been a captain at some point.
Colorado Avalanche, not on the list.
Okay.
Not on the list. Go back to John, 3-2. You just need 2 more to win this thing.
Tampa, even though I can't think of the second one. I'm just so many veterans.
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh,
Correct. The second one, Ryan McDonough.
Really?
McDonough was
see it
captain,
somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, had it in New York for a little bit. 4-2 John. He's on the brink of the win here. Back to you,
John's
Kyle.
looking good. Yeah.
Back to you, Kyle.
I'm
I'll
getting
say-
stumped here.
Yeah, there's a couple sneaky ones here, and then there's one that stood out to me. It was one of the first ones that came to mind when I was trying to compile this. We'll see if you guys.
He's just calling us dumb right now.
I think so.
A couple of the other ones are tough. I'll give you that.
Let's see. The Islanders have a bunch of old guys. Maybe them?
New York Islanders.
Okay.
Very nicely done. Anders
Bunch of
Lee
old guys.
and Bo Horvat.
Oh,
Yes,
Horvat, right?
yes,
yeah,
Yeah.
so not even
yeah.
the oldest
Not even
players
the
there,
old
but,
guys, yeah.
Those 2 guys. All right, 4-3.
Okay,
Tight
back
race.
in the
This is
hunt here.
John for the win, though. Did get to start, but
Hey, that's okay.
We'll
That's
still
okay.
give you this one.
I'm debating Winnipeg, but I'm like, who was... You know what? I'll go Winnipeg.
Winnipeg Jets is not on the list.
Who's
Oh,
before
boy.
Lowry?
Before Lowry, Wheeler.
Oh, yeah.
And
he's
then
Oh,
was it
okay.
Andrew Ladd for a little bit. Bit of a crazy streak that they had there. Back to Kyle. Door's still open for Kyle.
Yeah, I don't think it's right, but the Hurricanes.
Carolina Hurricanes, not on the list
Okay.
either.
Yeah.
Not on the list either. All right, back to John.
So you said one of them was like sneaky, right? Or something like...
One sneaky, one's obvious, apparently.
I'm going to go with San Jose, even though it feels
Ooh,
wrong.
San Jose is not correct. I'll tell you that. That was not that sneaky. Back to you, Kyle. Right there.
Oh,
right
I
there.
know what I'm going to do now. Sorry.
Okay, well, I don't
In
have a
that
good
case,
one
yeah.
here. So I'm just hoping that the Blackhawks have a sneaky one, hoping for like Alec Martinez having a captaincy.
Blackhawks do not have 2
Okay.
captains. Nick Foligno did get traded there, but then they named him
Yeah,
the
they
captain,
named him
so
captain,
he
though,
just
so-
sticks with it. John, do you have it?
The Kings have to have a second captain.
The LA Kings do not.
Oh, come on.
Oh, wow.
This is incredible. I mean, I don't even.
We're running out of teams
I
here.
know. There's only 2
kidding,
left.
eh?
I'll give you guys this hint because regardless, like if Kyle gets one here, you'll still have a chance
Sure.
to win. Both are Eastern Conference.
Okay, that's
Okay, well, that's good because I think we were both going Western.
Yeah, both in the East.
Do the Capitals have a second captain?
Capitals do not.
Okay.
Capitals do not.
I'm going to go with the Canadians as the East team that comes to mind.
Canadians do not either. This
We're
is
just-
incredible.
All right,
This is
I think we
incredible.
might need to tap out
You
here.
want to throw in the towel here? I
I'll
mean,
throw in the towel. John gets the win here.
It was leaning towards a John win anyways with the way things were trending. He had the lead already. It was the I actually mentioned a guy off the top, the Ottawa Senators, because Claude Giroux's there now.
Yes.
Oh.
And then the one that I thought was more obvious than a few of the other ones on this list, the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Oh,
Eric Carlson
Yep.
and Sidney Crosby, of
Oh,
course. So,
Carlson, yeah.
two big name
Okay,
captains there.
okay.
But you know what, John? I'll give you your flowers.
John gets the dub.
And we'll put it
I'll
down
take
the
it.
board. But
that was harder than I would say it seemed
Yeah.
at first. We were rattling them
Yeah,
off.
we were starting off decent, and it did not
Got a
go.
little
Yeah,
dicey.
I had a lot of hope at the start there, but yeah, the wheels started to fall off.
Alrighty.
So- All right, updated leaderboard here for you guys. Nice to see Kyle still got the lead, but John,
I like
got
that
the 5.
slash.
Yeah, you got the horizontal line there. That's big time, but that's all the time we've got for today. As always, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. This is Top Shelf presented by Skyscanner. Levi Smith for John Matisz and Kyle Cushman. We'll see you guys next time.